natives in a village beneath a towering wall. A giant belted door stood more than half a mile tall, behind which lived the mightiest creature of them all.
Well, we spoke on yesterday, on Friday, a little bit about just reminiscing about some of the involvement and what Kong means to these folks, and we're just going to kind of continue that conversation. And we can kind of do that if you want, from maybe starting with some of your questions, anything about King Kong and how these folks, it's tied in with their background and their fiber. So why don't we start with some folks? Questions right here in front.
When the King Kong first came out, was there like a Star Wars atmosphere with lines around the block and people watching the movie multiple times?
Okay, I'm going to repeat questions in case, because we're so crowded here. The fellow here, so people in the back know, asked if it was a Star Wars type atmosphere when Kong was released, where there were lines around the block. And anyone want to field that?
Well, I think there were. I didn't go to the opening, but I think there was in New York.
Yeah.
There were people standing in line
I think
around
they
the
played it
block.
simultaneously in two of the biggest theaters there.
Right, two theaters and then at Grauman's Chinese. And of course they had a stage show to begin with, which made it more attractive. And with trapeze artists and all sorts of hula dancers and African atmosphere.
Okay.
In addition to what I told you the other day, thought of something else. King Kong, of course, kills quite a few people during the course of the motion picture, but in real life, he actually saved a life. There was a fan about the age of many of you here who took me to dinner recently, and he said that when he was a little boy, he came from a dysfunctional family, that his father was in prison for murder, and his mother committed suicide, and he thought, oh, the heck with it, he was in a mood to kill himself. And he got the brand new issue of Famous Monsters of Film magazine with King Kong on the cover, and he was turning the pages and reading it avidly, and suddenly it said, to be continued next month. By then he was out of the mood, so he said King Kong saved his life.
We have another question. Right over here.
Mr. Harryhausen, you tell two great stories. Maybe I hope you have time for maybe one of them. Could you share with the audience the story you tell about your father taking you down to see the wall?
Oh yes.
And one more, and then that wonderful story, if there's only time, where you and your wife traveled west of Sumatra to find Skull Island in real life. That's a wonderful
we did. If you remember in Kong, Captain Engelhorn said, I think that's the language of the Nias Islanders. So all my life I wanted to go to the Nias Islands because I looked on the map and there was such a place. Cooper and Schotzak used to travel to Sumatra to make pictures and to Persia. And somehow Nias Islands got in the script. So my wife and I booked a cruise ship that went up through the Straits of Malacca, I think it's called. And we actually arrived at the Nias Islands. And of course, as we arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, and there was slight mist there, and I kept hearing Max Steiner's thumping theme as we approached the island, and I couldn't see any sign of a skull on top or a wall. And finally we all went ashore, and we had to get into dump trucks because they didn't have tourist facilities. And we went out to the native village, and I met one of the natives, and I thought I'd try Ruth Rose's speech, Balakom Nonahi. And the man put his hand on his hip and said, what are you talking about? So Ruth Rose was noted for making synthetic languages in many pictures. In She and in King Kong and the Son of Kong, they used all these artificial speeches. And the other one was, I used to get, when I was a little boy, after I saw Kong, they had the wall down in Culver City on the old Pathé lot, back lot 40 acres. And I wanted my dad to take me down every other Sunday to see this wall. And my school friend and I would stand there staring at this big wall through the gate, which was later destroyed in the fire of Atlanta for Gone with the Wind. But then we'd recite the same thing, Balacom Nonahi. It was a lot of fun. I regret those days have passed.
Ray Bradbury is 4 years younger than I, and when we were a couple of teenagers and he wanted to take a girl on a date, it could be done for $1. It was 21 cents for a first run film and a nickel to get him downtown to the major picture palaces, 5 cents for bottomless popcorn or jujubes or abba-zabbas. So I was always good $1 for a book. He would bring me a book and I would finance his date. One day in 1935, apparently had an extra hot, heavy date coming up because he wanted $2. Well, as an excuse for the extra $1, he brought me a copy of the novelization of King Kong, the book which theoretically was written by Edgar Wallace, the leading mystery author of the day in London. Actually, he wrote 2 or 3 words and dropped dead, but they kept his name on him. So Ray said, look, it's been signed by Edgar Wallace. That ought to be worth an extra $1. Well, I was young and naive. I didn't stop to question, how did this high school kid get the autograph of this famous author 6,000 miles away? I gave him his extra $1. Well, about 35 years ago, I was living in a smaller home than I have now. Just had 13 rooms, and the very most I could only get 65 people in the house at one time. But already I had accumulated so many friends that in order to celebrate my birthday, I had to have 5 birthdays: Friday night, Saturday matinee, Saturday night, Sunday matinee, and Sunday night. And Sunday night, Ray Bradbury was there, and he attracts fans like iron filings to a magnet. They were all clustered around him. And his eye fell upon that copy of King Kong that he had sold me many years ago for that extra $1. And he hesitantly took it off the shelf and opened it up, and he said, "Oh, Forry, I have a terrible confession to make. I wrote that Edgar Wallace." I said, "You dirty dog, give me back my $1." A few months later, I realized he probably regretted he'd ever sold me that book, because King Kong is one of his great favorites, both as a film and a novel. It's a rather expensive collector's item by now, but I did manage to get one, so I sent it over to him and I inscribed it to Ray Bradbury, from the real Edgar Wallace.
You want to take another question here? Anyone have any Kong reminiscing or anything they want to ask for you, Ray? Whatever happened to Helen Mack? Anyone know?
I
Forry?
have no idea. She's still around, I guess. I've never seen an obituary. She must still be around.
Okay, anything else?
If she died, did she have the runaway blues?
Right here?
I've read in a couple of different publications that there was an animation sequence in the film where some sort of a tool was left in the shot, like a pair of pliers or
Okay.
a screwdriver, and it was animated out of the scene so you couldn't notice it.
Okay,
Are you
I'm gonna-
familiar with that at
I'm going to
all?
repeat that just for the people in the back. The fellows had heard that there's a scene that was animated over to cover a tool that was left in a certain scene. Do either of you two know about that scene?
Was that in Kong or in one of
Yes.
my pictures?
No, it was in Kong.
In Kong, yeah, Obi told me about that once. I could never find it. I think it was hidden behind a glass or something. I don't know. Somebody left a pair of pliers in. If you run, of course, the Laserdisc, this age of Laserdisc, where you can sit there and do frame by frame analysis, you can see a lot of unusual things, including little wires holding Kong up when he was throwing the Tyrannosaurus over his shoulder. And people started analyzing these things out of existence. But when the picture came out, it was so dynamic you never even questioned those things. But now everybody's looking for the matte lines.